Over the course of recorded history, humans have killed roughly 587 million of each other. These lives were lost in an endless cycle of wars as people fought over territory, resources, and power. We can trace the psychological root of this violence back to the birth of language and symbolic thought. As soon as early humans could communicate complex ideas, they adopted a terrifying baseline assumption that physical death permanently terminates our experience. Today, modern science reinforces this assumption through the theory of abiogenesis. This is the idea that life emerged spontaneously, an unguided chemical accident brewing in a primordial soup billions of years ago. Under this framework, abiogenesis acts as a finite operating system for the human mind. It tells us that we are temporary, random blips of matter, and in a strictly finite universe, survival is a harsh zero-sum game where one person's gain requires another's loss. Facing an absolute deadline, we panic. To secure our brief, determined futures, we actively eliminate rivals and crush anyone who stands in the way of our dreams. But the entire moral logic of the system collapses if the science of unguided chemical evolution is demonstrably false. The cosmological theory we choose to believe about our origins isn't merely an academic debate. It serves as our primary moral framework, directly dictating whether we feel licensed to commit mass murder for a temporary advantage. To test this finite framework, we need to look closely at the laboratory science of chemical evolution, which attempts to replicate how life formed from non-living matter. The modern belief in a chemical origin of life largely stems from the 1953 Miller-Urey experiment. By passing electrical sparks through a mixture of gases thought to mimic early Earth, scientists claimed they could spontaneously generate the amino acid building blocks of life. However, this process requires heavy investigator interference. In a real primordial setting, those newly formed chemicals would instantly cross-react and turn into a dead toxic sludge. To make the experiment work, have to actively intervene, isolating and purifying the chemicals at every step. Even with intervention, researchers hit a massive roadblock with water. To build a complex protein, individual amino acids must link together in a process that strictly requires removing water molecules from the equation. In this animated logic model, we can see why a primordial ocean is actually a hostile environment. In liquid, water induces a destructive process called hydrolysis. The surrounding liquid element literally forces itself between the molecular building blocks, repelling them apart before they can bond. Then there is the ultimate barrier, the chirality problem. Molecules possess a physical handedness, either left or right. Unguided nature always produces a 50-50 randomized mixture of both. But biology demands homochiral or single-handed molecules to function. If even a fraction of a percent of an opposite-handed molecule enters the sequence, the assembly dies. The wrong shape physically caps the end of the line, acting as a permanent chain terminator that causes the entire structural sequence to freeze and fail. Random, unguided chemistry is inherently hostile to the structures required for life. The physical laws of the universe do not support a spontaneous chemical accident, which suggests the finite operating system is built on a scientific impossibility. The failure of unguided chemistry suggests that we must examine life through the lens of information theory rather than physical matter. DN. DNA functions as a dense, structured storage system, possessing a level of engineering that defies unguided formation. To illustrate, information theory shows us that the physical properties of ink cannot autonomously write a book. Similarly, the chemical properties of molecules cannot write the complex operating instructions required to run a living cell. DNA is so fragile that it suffers millions of errors every day. To survive its first generation, it relies on an array of advanced repair machines, which are themselves built using the exact instructions stored inside the DNA they fix. This circular dependency points towards cellular intelligence. The first cell required an embedded problem-solving source code, a dynamic memory capable of overseeing its own developmental trajectory and repairing itself. Recent biological research into biofields suggests that cellular intelligence is in constant connection with a non-local informational system. In an eternal cosmos where life is a ubiquitous property, this points to an intelligent coder whose divine memory permeates all living matter. The evidence shifts us toward an infinite operating system, a reality where life is an intentional eternal function of the cosmos, rather than a localized accident on a single planet. When we scale this realization up from the microscopic cell to human society, the implications rewrite our entire moral framework. Consider the historical teachings of figures like Jesus of Nazareth. Statements like God is within and the promise of eternal life are recontextualized here as literal biological truths. If an intelligent coder resides as an operative memory within every living cell, the zero-sum panic of a finite ticking clock completely evaporates. We are forced to see every human being as an eternal, intelligent fragment of a shared cosmic consciousness. When you recognize that the person across from you shares that endless continuity, eliminating them to secure a temporary earthly advantage becomes utterly illogical. Imagine a society that actually aligns its behavior with the true science of its origins. By recognizing our shared infinite nature, humanity naturally outgrows the artificial need for bloodshed and territorial conquest. A framework based on an accidental universe has nearly destroyed us. Embracing an eternal, intelligently designed cosmos is the only scientifically valid path left to save humanity from itself.